Hey, great. Welcome everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. I do want to let you know that it is a recording, and we are going to put it on YouTube when we're done. So friends can go ahead and watch it afterwards. I'll be providing the link. Give me until the end of the day, and you'll get that copy of the YouTube link. That having been said, I'll go ahead and start with the opening prayer. Diane?
Sure. Glory be to thee, O Lord my God. I beg of thee by thy name, through which he who is thy beauty hath been established upon the throne of thy cause, and by thy name through which thou changest all things, and gatherest together all things, and callest to account all things, and rewardest all things, and preservest all things, and sustaineth all things. I beg of thee to guard this handmaiden who hath fled for refuge to thee, and hath sought the shelter of him in whom thou thyself art manifest, and hath put her whole trust and confidence in thee. She is sick, O my God, and hath entered beneath the shadow of the tree of thy healing, afflicted, and hath fled to the city of thy protection, diseased, and hath sought the fountainhead of thy favors, sorely vexed, and hath hasted to attain the wellspring of thy tranquility, burdened with sin, and hath set her face toward the court of thy forgiveness. Attire her by thy sovereignty and thy loving kindness, O my Lord and my beloved, with the raiment of thy balm and thy healing, and make her quaff of the cup of thy mercy and thy favors. Protect her, moreover, from every affliction and ailment, from all pain and sickness, and from whatsoever may be abhorrent unto thee. Thou in truth art immensely exalted above all except thyself. Thou art verily the healer, the all-sufficing, the preserver, the ever-forgiving, the most merciful. Behold.
Thank you. We have a friend from Athens joined us. Jaden, welcome. At this point, I will hand it over to Sharzad, and let me know. I'll be guiding the screen, so when you want to forward it on,
yes, I'll prompt you. I have a master script right here. Theater major. All right. Welcome everybody to Elevated Conversations. First of all, I want to thank from the bottom of my heart my beloved family, Christy and Byron, for inviting me and letting me know about this event today. And we've been trying to get everything in line for me to do this for quite a while. And Michael, thank you so much for, my beautiful Christy sister. and Michael, so much thank you for all the technical help today, and keeping us all in line, and all the write-ups and all the wonderful stuff. I'd like to start by saying that today's topic was a difficult one for me because who is a hero? Who is a heroine? I mean, we have books and books and books written about women and the difference they've made in today's society. This one is Extraordinary Women in History, 70 remarkable women who made a difference and inspired and broke barriers. And this is just a few women, 70 of them. Leah Gale wrote this book. Highly recommend it. It is an absolutely great read. I was given this as a gift when I won some award. And so, you know, there are so many women heroes in our lives every day. Our mothers, our teachers, our friends that go through heroic acts of just surviving family challenges, health children going through bullying at school, health issues with your children. Some have children with terminal illnesses, and they're heroically holding it together with their spouses or with their partners or with their family to help their children. And those, to me, I mean, my first hero was my mother. I don't know who your first woman hero was, but it was my mother, the woman who told me some of these stories that I'm about to talk about today. She is here, and she's here with us in soul because she told me some of the stories today, and she had some memory issues, so she would forget she told me, and then I would remind her she told me, and yes, it was true. But she will be seeing the recording later. The first thing I want to do is, because I'm a teacher and educator, I looked up the word hero and heroine. And what does that mean? And the Webster's Dictionary, it says that a hero or a heroine is a noun. And the meaning of it, or the use of it, is these are the synonyms of hero or heroine: a mythological or legendary figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength and ability. An illustrious warrior, a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. The principal character in a literary or dramatic work used specifically of a principal male character or female character, especially when contrasted with the opposite sex. The central figure in an event, period, or movement. In plural, we say heroes, object of extreme admiration, devotion, a legendary priestess. And heroine, interesting how the hero lookup had a whole 2-page list. The heroine only had a few lines. I won't dig that in. Heroine is a mythological or legendary woman, often divine descent in strength or ability, a woman admired and emulated for her achievements and qualities. American heroines such as Eleanor Roosevelt and Rosa Parks, remembered as heroines. The principal female character in a literary or dramatic work, like Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, and the central figure in an event or period. And that's all it says about women. Okay. Now, what I want to do now is discuss what are the attributes, what are the characteristics of a heroine? What is it that makes you a heroine? Why do we give that title to someone with these attributes? By the way, Casey, there's 2 of you. Double Casey. So what is a heroine? A heroine is a woman with courage. A heroine is a woman who has fortitude in the face of adversity. A heroine concerns for others in need. A concern to descend to moral cause, knowing there is a personal risk without the expectation of rewards. A heroine asked to redeem society by overcoming great odds in service to successfully completing extraordinary acts of strength, courage, and goodness. Their attributes are self-sacrifice, stamina, and courage required to triumph over adversity and evil. Now, think about who you know. Who do you know that was that to you in your life? Was it your daughter? Was it your mother? Was it your grandmother? Was it a teacher? Was it who was that special to you to have these attributes? Can you name them in your heart? Say a prayer for them if they're in heaven. Because we are shaped by our mentors. And if they were women and they influenced us that much to have an existence today, this is who we need to thank, the heroine in your life. Now, we're going to talk about 4 typical heroines today of the Iranian Baha'i community throughout history and now. It is very difficult to talk about 4 incredible women who have sacrificed so much for what they stand for. And I could talk about one of them for 2 hours. There's so much data about these women, and it really doesn't do them justice to have 10 minutes each, honestly. But it will create an in-depth conversation, which is what this is about, elevated conversations, right? Let's talk about some of the categories we look at heroines. Excuse me. We have women who are athletic women, daredevils of the sky. We have women pioneering as innovators and performers and reformers. We have women in activism. We have women in leadership roles. We have women achieving heights of productivity and creativity. We have women with contributions in war and military service. We have women with wanderlust and conservationists. So these are some of the things in this book I was telling you about who these women are. And some of them are people you've known throughout history. Now, none of the 4 women I'm going to talk about today are in this book. So it's important to discuss the women I'm going to talk about today. So let's begin the first amazing woman. And we can have the first slide or the first picture of Zynab. Who was she? You can see her picture on the screen. Zynab was the legendary maiden of Zanjan in Iran. And her title was Rostam Ali. And Rostam is typically a famous Persian mythical hero. So they called her Rostam Ali. Now, as a costume designer, I like to look at this photo because she didn't dress like a woman, did she? She chose to dress like a man, and I have reasons for that. She had reasons for that. She was born approximately in 1834 and died approximately by July of 1850. So she was only 16 years old when she died. She was born in Zanjan, Iran, and the location of her death was at Fort Ali Mardin Khan in Zanjan, Iran. Now, I have some tidbit to tell you about how the Galveston Gazette in Texas wrote about this woman in the 1800s. The Galveston Gazette had an article about the women that were fighting for their freedom and rights to believe and exist, and women's rights in the 1800s. And it was written in the Galveston, Texas Gazette. And I'm going to read the article they wrote in there. I thought it was a joke. No, this was the Galveston Gazette. So let's continue on. In the Galveston Gazette, it said, the diplomatic dispatches in various archives in Europe show that the British and French attachés regularly informed the respective governments about the Persian events during the Bab's ministry. Bab was the precursor to Baha'u'llah, who was the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. The Bab was like, in Christianity, we have John the Baptist. The Bab came before Baha'u'llah to tell people of the coming of Baha'u'llah. Therefore, it is not surprising to find the following newspaper clipping from the Galveston Gazette in January 24, 1851. Now, the newspaper was founded in 1850. It says, Paris papers contain accounts from Tehran, Persia, giving an account of the execution of the chief of sect of the Babis at the capital. One of the dogmas of this sect is the social equality of man and woman. and its followers having taken up arms in defense of their creed, were aided by a regiment of about 1,000 women who are represented to have used their muskets and very considerable effect in the engagements which took place with royal troops, although on time ultimately overpowered. And there's a picture of where they fought. Now, other historical accounts that there was 3,000 women and children fighting alongside the men at this ordeal. The legend of the heroine of Battle of Zanjan is unique in religious history. And the reason why is because the rivals of the bravery, for instance, of Joan of Arc, is really famous in the mid-15th century of France. She too, Joan of Arc, was 19, and she was burned at the stake in May 30th of 1431. So unlike Joan, this woman was a heroine because of the following reasons. We know there were 3,000 women and children in battle at Zanjan who rendered extraordinary bravery in helping men, as well in doing all the usual household chores. So they not only fought with the men, they did it in backwards and heels. I mean, they were cooking, cleaning, feeding their babies, sewing, washing dishes, and fighting with the men. Unfortunately, once the women were captured, they were sold as slaves later. And if they were not massacred first, but those who survived the battle were displaced. Ultimately, there are a lot of stories about these women, but especially one shines, and that is Zynab, mainly because of her age. She was 16 years old when she died. But the hero of this story about Zynab is Haghjoo. Haghjoo was a very famous mullah, a famous priest. And he decided that he really believed in this new message from the Babi religion. And he became a Babi. This is a clergyman. This is someone who was part of the institution of the clergy. And he became a follower of the Bab in the years of his ministry. And he was very opposed by the rest of the clergy because he was called an infidel for believing in something that was different. And he was interrogated by the Shah of Iran, by the king, and he was seriously in trouble. But because he was still a clergy, there was a certain amount of power he still had. Mr. Haghjoo came to Zanjan, where this young woman was, Zynab, and he preached at the mosque. He did a sermon at the mosque. And it was unavoidable that so many people were attracted to this new message. So many people, and it kind of shook the clergy up a little bit. But back in the ladies section, in the back row, in the nosebleed section, as we say in theater, there was a woman, a little young woman. Her name was Zynab, and she heard this. And she was moved. Her heart was moved so much when she heard about the teachings of the Bab and the coming of the one, the promised one of all ages, Baha'u'llah. And so she became a Babi. And so at the time, there was a lot of political opposition with the clergy and the Babi movement. And the Babis were there to fight for their rights, fight for the right to exist. And so they were threatened. They were basically defending themselves. So they went and captured a fort in Tabarsi, and they fought to their dying death until the clergy and the officials, government officials said, "We swear to you on the Quran that we will not kill you. We swear to you on the Quran that we will not kill you." And they, after they said that, they're swearing on the Quran, they laid down their arms and they walked out, and they were immediately killed. So they were lied to. But in Zanjan, where there was about 6,000 people fighting, there was Zainab, and Zainab went to the clergy, went to Hujjat, went to him and said, "Please, let me go fight. Let me go fight. I will dress as a man. Let me go fight, and for the rights of our community." And he at first said, "No, a woman can't do this." So she was able to do that and gather the rest of the women together and create a coalition of women to fight for women and women's rights. So this was a stone fort at the edge of the quarter of the Bobby Quarter. And in Nabil's narrative, a history book written by the History of the Baha'i Faith, historians later say that the Bobbies captured this fort fighting in 2 days. They were able to capture this fort and hold on to the fort. So, as we know, girls weren't permitted to go to the battlefield, and therefore she wore the disguise of a young man and joined her all the friends, and no reference could be found that there was a young girl fighting, because she was dressed as a man, and there's her picture, right? And immediately, excuse me, when she went to Hujjat, she said, "I have no father, I have no brother. I want to fight this holy war in the path of God. Permit me, please, to fight. The holy war is prohibited for woman," he said to her. And she said, "Is this dispensation the illusions of veils of the past? This has to be torn asunder. Issue your judgment accordingly to me. Why are you saying no? You're talking about the oneness of men and women, but why aren't you letting me go fight?" She supplicated to him and supplicated to him, and to allow her to join her in the battlefield, confessing that no one is aware of this secret and that she should be able to carry her heart's desire and fight for justice. So her desire was to sacrifice her life for justice. She was weeping and supplicating so movingly that Hujjat could not resist her supplication and told her, this is what he told her: "I pray for your success, and be assured that as you are sincere in your desire, you will be surely victorious. It is the resurrection day. It is the resurrection day, and the hidden secrets in the past scripture are now revealed and cleared in front of the people's eyes. God looks at our action and purity of the heart. Men and women are equal in the sight of God. With your action, you have won the crown of victory above and beyond any man who had the same aspiration. Follow your brethren, but be aware that we are not conducting a holy war. We are just trying to defend ourselves." So this was not a holy war. This was not a holy war. This was just defending yourself. That confirmation and encouragement from Hujjat gave Zainab a new life. She was just elated. She felt more courageous with her continuous bravery and the cry of, "O Lord of the age," which is what many of the Bobbies would say when they would fight. They would say, "O Lord of the age," to put fear in the enemy's heart. But they would say it with such power that the enemy would just, "Oh." So, "O Lord of the age," they would say. And she continued to fight in this manner for no less than 5 months. She would rarely rest or sleep. She was 16 years old. She wouldn't eat, she wouldn't rest, and she wouldn't sleep. Her bravery was an example for men and increased their courage to fight the fight. Hojat called her Rostam Ali. That was her title because she had so much power. She was a petite little thing. She wasn't even tall, but she had so much power and heart. And she never followed military protocol. She never fought from a single position. She just showed up with her sword in hand and would attack whenever was needed. She was in one of the barricades dressed as in man's clothing with other pure souls one day, and the soldiers attacked the barricade. That lioness, she came out at these soldiers. She was outnumbered, for heaven's sake. She just had a sword. Look at her. She just had a sword, and she came out of the barricades, and she said, "Name me a sect free of disgrace. Tell me the tale of Islam's unbelief." She said it with so much heart and power that she was able to shout these verses from everything she had. She threw herself from the barricade and charged the enemy soldiers, thinking that a large group was following her. They fled and ran away in fear. She destroyed 3 defenses. But that way, while entering the 4th, one of the people at the barricade called her to come back. So she returned. One of the townspeople shot and killed her. Just like that. Zynab had personified her love for faith and the ultimate desire to sacrifice her life for her beloved. She had requested Hojat to grant her this wish, and eventually she reached the object of her desire. Until her death, nobody knew who this girl was. She was fighting shoulder to shoulder with men. It was a glorious day, one of the bloodiest days of that period. On that day, many sacrificed their lives. Mothers lost their children. Children died. Parents died. Lovers lost their loved ones. Children were born without having a chance to know who their parents were. The companions were sorrow-stricken by her death. Nevertheless, all women in her village accepted the Babi faith when they heard of her bravery. Her glorious story became a legend among the people of Zanjan and will be told forever in future generations. So, and this was before Tahirih, the next heroic woman I'm going to talk about. They're around the same time. Tahirih was a little older than Zynab, but Zynab was, I would say, a lot like Joan of Arc. Very, very, very parallel to Joan of Arc. All right. We're going to have questions and discussions at the end. I'm going to do all of the women, and then we're going to have a lovely discussion. The next woman I want to talk about is Tahirih. Let's go to her. Hopefully I didn't go over. She was born in 1814, was an exemplar of the women's strength in Persia at a time when most women were kept illiterate and hidden from the public sphere. In 1852, at the age of 30, it's very unclear because all her poetry, her birth certificate, everything was destroyed when she died, when she was murdered and strangled. So she, we think she was between the ages of 36 and 38, anywhere between 35 to 38, but within there. Tahirih was executed for her beliefs and her activities as the Babi in the Babi religion. This is an actual rendering of her, and this is an actual photo of Tahirih reading the Quran. Her title was Qudratul Ain, which means solace, the pure, and the solace of the eyes. That was her title. And let's talk about who she was. She was the first woman ever to take her veil out in public, off in public in a square in Tabriz, one of the most religious communities in Iran. Tahirih was not raised in a poor family. She was of wealth. She was born in wealth. She was her father was a clergy professor of school. He was an educator, and she came from a royal background. So she had blue blood, as we say, you know, and she was came from an extremely wealthy family. She was a poet, a very famous poet in Iran, wrote some of the most famous poetry as a woman emancipator, but she was a poet. When women were not allowed to be literate, her father secretly educated her and warned her that if anybody knows I'm educating you, you can get killed. So make sure you don't do anything. But of course, knowledge is power. And the more she was educated, the more she started studying the Quran, the more her mind started opening up, the more vocal she got. Oh, what do we do with a woman who in the 1800s is so vocal? It's dangerous for her. So what do? Marry her off as soon as possible. So who do they marry her off to? Her uncle's son, her cousin, to tone her down, right? That's what we say in Texas. And so she had 3 children. And it was a disastrous marriage. Her husband divorced her once she started having an opinion and educating other women. Her husband divorced her eventually because they were calling her all kinds of horrible names like prostitute and you're cheating on your husband and all kinds of things. And she lost her 3 children. She was not able to raise her children. And so how much pain is that to lose your children like that? But she sacrificed everything for her beloved. She was one of the letters of the living, which was a disciple. She was the disciple of the Bab. But as she was educated, she would go to the mosques and go where the women's section was and educate the women to learn to read and write and educate the women to think for themselves. And she was highly respected amongst women. But even the men who were the same faith as her eventually had issues with a woman being so vocal. They just had a problem with that. And it was against everything Islam had taught them for a woman to be so vocal. So, but I'm gonna kind of skip the pre issues that she was having. But one thing to know about Tahirih, and the most important thing she did, is her resilience in reason and logic and answering the clergy based on her theological intelligence of what she was reading in the Quran, because not even the clergy knew what they were reading in the Quran, but she knew it. She interpreted it where it made sense. And so they couldn't answer her. She was making sense. And so when they couldn't answer her, the more they couldn't answer her, people were following her, but then the rest of the people, the clergy especially, and the very fundamentalist people, were not happy with a woman being so vocal. And so in the end, she begged, she was able to have communication with a man named Sayyid Kazem, who was one of the early believers in the Bab. And she asked her father and her husband at the time whether she could go travel to Karbala, to Mecca, to visit Sayyid Kazem in Iraq, the modern day Iraq. And she was going to walk to go on foot to go see Sayyid Kazem. And then when she gets there, he's already passed away. So she got to be good friends with his wife, his widow, and his widow was able to give the writings of Sayyid Kazem to Tahirih. And Tahirih made it upon herself to read all of the notes and writings of Sayyid Kazem and went on to a journey to teach about this new religion that has settled in her heart. And so she became such an avid educator and teacher for women, especially women and young girls, that the clergy wanted her out as soon as possible. Then there was a lot of political strife with the early bobbies. There was a lot of bobbies that kind of got a little gun happy, and they started doing things politically that was not permitted by the Bob for them to do, but they went and attacked some government officials, even the king of Iran. And so it wasn't anything the Bob had approved, but they had to blame all the bobbies. So then it's like almost the, the Native American situation, where if one Native American killed a Caucasian person, then the entire tribe was annihilated. So it was the same kind of situation, to where one or two of the bobbies took up arms and started hurting government officials. That's why in the Baha'i faith, we don't get involved with partisan politics. We don't do these things. Why? Because it is not about politics. It is about human rights. It is about creating unity in a community. And such a thing, such a violent act, isn't going to create unity. It's going to create more strife for the community, correct? Anyway, so they started blaming her. They said it's her fault. She's the one who has planned the death of the king. So she was taken to the king's palace. She was taken to the king's palace, and he fell in love with her. Why? Because she was beautiful. She not only had a brain, she was beautiful. Like, people would faint when they saw her. She was that beautiful. And so he tried 4 times. 4 times they tried, 5 times, 6 times. They kept saying, we can't. And I will put you in my harem. No, she said. What do you mean you're going to put me in your harem? She talked back to the king, and he liked her wit. But he couldn't fight against all the clergy who wanted her gone. And what got her into trouble? Let's talk about what got her into trouble. And she was writing all this beautiful poetry, and I'm going to read one of her poems that's very famous, and everybody knows it's her poem. So I'm going to read one of her poems to you. But I do want to talk about the conference of Badash. Let's continue on with the slide. There it is. And this painting is painted by Ivan Lloyd of Arizona. I have this print in my studio, and it's three prints. One is her teaching the women and children. One is her taking her veil off in a public square, and one is how they killed her. And then that picture is here too. You will see, or the painting. And I was very lucky that my mother got me this print from Ivan when he was selling them at the Baha'i conference. So I'm very blessed to have this in my life, this painting. Anyway, so let's talk about the conference of Badash. There's a conference that all the bobbies gathered in a square, and here is when Tahirih basically did something revolutionary that had never been done before in the history of women's rights. Okay. So in June to July 1848, a number of the Babi leaders met in the hamlet of Badash at a conference organized in part and financed by Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. Because Baha'u'llah was a Babi first, right? That was set in motion, the public existence and the propagation of the Babi movement. It was the first conference ever of the Babi movement. In one account, the purpose of the conference was to initiate complete break in the Babi community with the Islamic past, so that it's not the same as Islam. It is a renewed Islam, correct? And so on the same account, we have the Bab was in prison, and it was Tahirih who pushed the notion that there should be an armed rebellion to save the Bab to create this break. But another source does say that the prominent Babi leaders wanted to plan an armed revolt, but the Bab said no, and Tahirih was discouraging it. You know, it's just who you talk to, right? A lot of it was not recorded, but the Babis were divided at this conference, and the purpose of this conference was to come together, and decide what to do with all these attacks on the people, and they were called heretics. So they were viewed as heretics. So as an act of symbolism, she walks in the middle of this square. Do you see how all these men are standing around? There's no other women, right? There's just all these men, right? And these were all the Babis. Most of them are actually all of them were Babis. And she comes in the middle of the square, and as an act of symbolism, she takes off her veil in front of an assemblage of men, and on one occasion, and brandished a sword on the other. The unveiling caused so much shock and disturbance amongst the men present that many of them had regarded Tahirih as the example of purity and chastity, were so shocked that some of them even left the Babi faith, and others took a knife. One man took a knife and slit his throat. He could not handle the fact that she took her veil off. And she as she was taking her she stood up, and as she was taking her veil off, she says, "Verily, amid gardens and rivers shall the pious dwell on the seat of truth, in the presence of the potent king." And she said that this is the judgment day. This is the judgment day. It's the trumpet blast. This is the judgment day. And so the men were so distraught, and it was such a commotion that it caused a lot of stir amongst the Babis. The conference of Badash is considered by the Babis and Baha'is as a signal moment that demonstrated that Sharia law had been abrogated and superseded by the Babi law. And the unveiling, however, led to accusations of immorality by Muslim clerics at the time of the fact that she did that. And that gave him reason. And even a Christian missionary accused her of immorality. The Bab responded with the accusations of immorality by supporting her position and endorsed the name of that Baha'u'llah gave her. And that's when they called her Tahirih the Pure, because everybody was saying she wasn't for doing that. So they called her Tahirih the Pure. A jailer who had personal contact with her lauded her character and behavior. And modern women scholars review this kind of accusation as part of a pattern faced by women leaders throughout history that currently we're seeing in the Islamic regime today, but let's not talk about that. But this was the first woman to take her veil off in public. This woman. After this, she was imprisoned for 4 years. She was under extreme house arrest. And she knew what her fate would be. She knew what her fate would be, but she didn't stop teaching the Baha'i faith or the Babi faith. She went to court, and they tried to convince her to change her mind, to recant everything she has done. But we knew that her final sentence was at last coming. The day she knew she was going to be executed, she wore a dress of white. If we want to go to the next slide. And there he says, she tells them, "You can kill me as soon as you like, but you cannot," those were her last words, "you can kill me as soon as you like, but you cannot stop the emancipation of women. You cannot stop it." Okay, next slide. And they come to her. She wears a wedding dress. Of course, I have to notice the dress because I'm a costume designer. She wears a wedding dress, and they strangle her with her own shawl and throw her in a pit. E.G. Brown, the famous renowned English scholar who wrote a book about my year in Iran, in Persia, remembers what happened that day. He saw it all. And this is what he said: the appearance of such a woman as Tahirih in any country and at any age is rare phenomenon. But in such a country as Iran, it is a prodigy, nay, almost a miracle. Alike in virtue of her marvelous beauty, her rare intellectual gifts, her fervid eloquence, her fearless devotion, and her glorious martyrdom, she stands incomparable and immortal amidst her countrywomen. Had the religion of the Bab no other claim to greatness, this were sufficient. It has produced a heroine like Qudratul Ain, another one of the titles given to her, solace of the eyes. And you know, he was a Cambridge University professor that spent a year in Iran writing about these people. And so his accounts are very well written in history. I want to end by reading one of her poems for you with her section. I can find it. Oh, here it is. The famous poem is called Point by Point. And this is what she wrote. If I met you face to face, I would erase my heartbreak. Pain by pain, ache by ache, word by word, point by point. In search of you, just your face, I roam through the streets lost in disgrace. House to house, lane to lane, place to place, door to door. My heart, hopeless, broken, crushed, I heard it pound till blood gushed from me, fountain by fountain, stream by stream, river by river, sea by sea. The garden of your lips, your cheeks, your perfumed hair, I wander there, bloom to bloom, rose to rose, petal to petal, scent to scent. Your eyebrow, your eye, and the mole on your face, somehow they tie me. Trait to trait, kindness to kindness, passion to passion, love to love. Where I grieve with love, your love, I will reweave the fabric of my soul, stitch by stitch, thread by thread, warp by warp, woof by woof. Last I, Tahirih, searched my heart. I looked line by line. What did I find? You and you, you and you, you and you. At this time, we'd like to hear a beautiful song. The next heroine is Mona Mahmoudi Nejad, and I have not a lot to say about her, actually a lot of personal things to say about her, but we will now listen to the Smith and Dragoman song dedicated to Mona Mahmoudi Nejad.
in the cradle of his faith. Where the rivers turn to red, the sunlight softens the dark, and the shadows in their lives drift apart. She stands before her fate, and the heavens open the gates. From the darkness they are called. 10 brave women to face the end. She smiles and prays for their faith, and she knows their inner souls are filled with grace. One final chance to deny. She lifts her eyes, no is her reply. Mona, angel, resolute and strong, your smile drifts across the ages and whispers your song. Mona, the comfort they feel from your eyes, in the silence that echoes before Mona dies, in the silence that echoes before Mona dies. She is led into the square. All the angels have gathered there. The rope hangs down from the sky. Her soul quickening prepares to fly. Her heart eternally wed. A kiss for the road that leaves her for dead. Mona, angel, resolute and strong, your smile drifts across the ages and whispers your song. Mona, the comfort they feel from your eyes, in the silence that echoes before Mona dies, in the silence that echoes before Mona dies.
Thank you. Mona Mahmoudi Nejad was born September 10th, 1965. She was a year older than me. June 18th, 1983 is when she passed away, when she was killed, martyred. Together with 9 other Baha'i women, they were sentenced to death by hanging in a public square in Iran on the grounds of being members of the Baha'i faith. The official charges range from misleading children and youth and being a Zionist as part of the Baha'i World Center located in Israel. Before I begin, I want to start a little bit about my father and her father. Are you there, Christy and Byron?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mahmoudinejad, who my dad called Jamshid, they grew up together from grade school. And Mr. Mahmoudinejad was a devout Muslim. And my dad was the person who told him about the Baha'i faith. They were best friends and soulmates. They were so close growing up that they vowed a prayer of brotherhood and slit their fingers and put their fingers together so they can be one brother. They loved each other so much that they both called their daughters Mona. Mona, who is your brother's wife, and Mona, who was martyred. So my mother told me that when they told us that they had killed Mr. Mahmoudinejad, we were at a Baha'i meeting and they announced his name. My dad shrilled with pain. He didn't know. He was just like, they killed my brother. And Mr. Mahmoudinejad met his wife. He eventually became a Baha'i because they were inseparable. They went all through high school together and they were just soulmates. And then finally he became a Baha'i, and then he decided to marry his wife, and they decided to go pioneering in I think an Arabic country. They went pioneering, and they had Mona and her sister were born in a pioneering post. So, but my mom told me that we had is right before we had children. Me and your dad and Mr. Mahmoudinejad and Mrs. Mahmoudinejad, it was the most amazing time of our lives. We were young, and Mr. Mahmoudinejad and your dad were the same age, and then me and his wife were around the same age. And so they had amazing memories together. And so with that being said, why did Mona get martyred? Why was she arrested? First, they arrested her father, then they arrested her, then they forced her father to go and convince her to recant and give all the names of the other Baha'is to the forces so that they can continue to torture her. They basically tortured her every day, and all she would do is sit silent every day. But she was hung in a public square with 9 other women. Okay. But I know we're running out of time. I do want to say this. This is why she got into a world of trouble. When she was in school, she wrote this in her poem. It was a classroom assignment. And she wrote this. I had the piece of paper right here, what she wrote. Just a second. And she wrote this right here. Okay. And they hadn't arrested anybody. It was the revolution. She was a Sunday school teacher, children's class teacher. She was very active with the kids. She loved to dance and loved to, she was a youth. Okay. And so what got into the trouble? She wrote an essay at school. And that got her into trouble. Okay. Freedom of speech. Let's talk about that. Mona was an eloquent writer, and ever since her childhood, she put her feelings to paper with fluency and candor. She was in the 11th grade of Pirnia High School in Shiraz when her teacher assigned the essay. The title of the essay was, her essay, "The fruit of Islam is freedom and tolerance, and whoever has tasted this fruit has benefited from it." That was the title that she had to write about. So she wrote in her essay, "Freedom is a bright word amongst all the shining words that exist in the world. Human beings have always wanted freedom. then how was this freedom taken away from them? Why do human beings not have freedom already? Why are there bullies in the world? Why are there people who use force and commit every kind of injustice to protect their own interests? Why don't you let me be free to say what I am and what I want, and to tell people about my religion? Why don't you give me the freedom of expression to write in the press and speak on the radio and television? Yes, freedom is a divine gift, and we must benefit from this gift as well. But you do not allow it. Why don't you let me speak freely as a Baha'i? Mona's essay led to so much havoc in the classroom that when it was read out and the teacher sent her to the school's office principal, the schoolmaster questioned Mona, who refused to back down. Her parents were eventually summoned to the school and managed to calm their daughter down. And then they were all arrested. So here we go. And I'm not going to get into details, but one little story about Mona was that they would not give fruit to the Baha'i women. You know, they were very badly nourished with food. And so there was one prisoner that whose family brought her fruit. So because Mona was only 17, she gave it all to Mona. And Mona went and cut the fruit up in as many pieces as she could and shared them with everybody. That is how much love she had for her cellmates. This is my dad's best friend and brother, Mr. Jamshid Mahmoudi-Nejad, his wife, and the 2 daughters. And I have lots of family pictures, but they're in my brother's shed, and it was 125 degrees for me to get all the pictures out. So I'm sorry I don't have family pictures, but we have a lot of family pictures. Hopefully when we get to them, I can share them with Michael or Christian Byron, and you can see all of the pictures. I think there's one picture with Mr. Mahmoudi-Nejad holding Mona, my baby sister, in his arms, you know. So my parents were very close to Mona's parents. And they both men called their daughters Mona, which was, I thought, Mona, my sister's name, was inspired by Mona Yazdi, whose father was a counselor in Africa, because we knew them when we were pioneering in Africa. But the first time the men talked, they were like, "Oh, isn't Mona a nice name?" And they both ended up calling their daughters Mona in the end. All right. I would like not to end because Mona's story has been subject of many plays. There's a play that was written, A Dress for Mona. There's many plays that have been written about Mona because of her heroic acts of being the youngest martyr. And there were 9 other women who were publicly executed. One thing about Mona was when they told her to recant her faith 4 or 5 times, told her father to go and convince her to recant her faith. Her father begged her, "Mona, recant, give the names." She would say, "What? What, do you want me to turn people in?" "No, I'm not going to do that." The dad couldn't convince her. So he went back, they killed the father, and then they martyred Mona. And when Mona, the clergyman said, "Change your religion, recant, repent." And she said, no. She wouldn't even say no. She just sat there quietly looking at him. They were very abusive to the women. And she was a minor, and so she was abused the most because she was obviously a virgin. And you know, there's a lot of things that they do to those women in prison that were considered infidels. And so Mona ended up, when a time came for them to kill her or martyr her, she took the rope, kissed it, and put it around her own neck, and sacrificed her life. I mean, that's how she did it. She took the rope. She didn't let them put it on her. She kissed the rope and put it around. So Doug Cameron, a famous Canadian musician back in the 80s, made a video about her story, and it made top of the chart. Well, it made it to the top of the charts, and it was number 14 in the charts. And I actually sang on stage with Doug, and he had a lot of fun stories about the making of the video, especially hat. They made him wear a hat. And he said, it's because I was balding. They made me wear a hat. But anyway, but I want you to watch. It was an 80s video. It was really like 80s, but I really wanted you to see this video. So let's play it.
آره برادر کلک همشونو میکنی الله آره
یالا زود باش کار داریم میخوایم بریم زود باش بجام از اول کاره
آره برادر کلک همشونو میکنی
dancing Send your love, send your love around the world. We'll go dancing. Oh, send your love to me. Send your love. I have to say, I've been dancing. I've been dancing. Send your light to me. Send your light, light the world. We'll be dancing.
That was an amazing video, and I just have to say two things. One is that Mona was buried at the Baha'i cemetery along with all the women, and nobody was allowed to go to the funeral because they didn't like all the commotion. And then in the end, a year later, they desecrated all of the graves. So the Baha'i cemetery was destroyed. And so, and in the video, I don't know if you noticed some famous faces, but there was Alex Rocco from the Adventures of Teddy Z, who was a Baha'i, and he played the mullah, the clergy, and Seals and Crofts and Dash Crofts, all famous Texas musicians. So they were all in the video. But it was a very, very beautiful video. And she was with the children. She was a teacher and a writer and young and full of life and a strong heroine. And it makes it especially special for me because my father and her father were so close. And they both had children named Mona, girls named Mona. So I thought that was really an important one. And I'm going to make the last one kind of quick because this is someone who's still with us. She is not, thank God she's still with us, but she is also a writer, and she's currently in prison. She's 70 years old. Her name is Mrs. Mahvash Sabet, and she was in prison for 10 years in Iran because she was members of the group Yaran, which is the Baha'i administrative group that takes care of the Baha'i community in Iran. And all 7 of them were arrested, 2 of which were women. And the women were really mistreated, tortured a lot. But these 2 incredible women that were, this is her when she was younger, but that's her now. But the women that were together, Fatiba and Mahvash, they were arrested together. The second time, they got a new 10-year sentence. So this is currently, so if you want to write to your Congress people about this, they have arrested them again for another set. She has written a book of poetry called Poems from Prison. And I'm just going to leave you, I'm going to let you look her up, but I'm going to leave you with one of her poems before we close. And one story about Mahvash is that the famous journalist, Miss Saberi, who was in prison, said that Mahvash and Fariba were so loving to her and so caring to her, and they gave her so much love and care, and they have been a source of amazing comfort to the women prisoners that are there due to whatever reason, for showing a bit of hair, or doing something that's unacceptable as far as being a woman. So she has written many poems, and I wanted to leave you with one of her poems. And please look her up. She is an amazing writer, and she won a major award, a world award for her poetry. And so I'm going to share one of her poems. I have so many here. What are they doing to us in this perilous place, this prison of loss? But what can they do to a handful of dust in the middle of chaos? If they cut open our veins, red tulips will blush like blood in the fields. If they padlock our lips, the mouths of 1,000 spring buds are unsealed. And she has a husband and kids, and she had to lose 10 years of their lives. And then she came out of prison And she writes her accounts about what it was like to be away for 10 years. All of the technology had changed. Her kids had grown up from being little infants to teenagers. And so it really, really was really hard for her when she came out of prison after 10 years. And then now she's back in again for 10 more years. And the reason is there's no reason. That's the whole thing. There is no reason. After her first release, she does talk about she climbed into the car in front of the prison. This is just when she got released after 10 years. She climbed into the car and drove to Tehran with her husband. Home was beautiful with everyone busy doing things. Your prayers were tasted of eternity, yet everything felt new. She didn't know what to do with the money her husband gave her. She was dazzled by the new technology that had taken over during her time behind bars. She felt fearful of open places, even in her own home. She did not feel safe where there were cameras detecting her every move. She felt like someone was watching her all the time. Her family had a new house, and it seemed as familiar as a hotel room, though occasionally she spotted remnants of her old life, like a photograph or a dress she wore in the past, or a tray she had. But mostly she recognized nothing in her own home. Did we have this before? She told her husband. Where did this come from? Don't you remember? Her family member said. No, she didn't remember. She didn't remember anything from the past. The dresses in the cupboard were mostly new, but she did recognize one or two, and it filled her with sadness that she had memories of whatever outfit she wore to something before all this. It was a reminder of the past, and she was forced to leave all this behind. She had to forget her old habits. I had to adapt myself to living in a thin blanket on a hard concrete floor versus sleeping on a bed. And she had to read and write her poetry on this concrete floor that was giving her back pain. She blamed no one for her ordeal. I'm a Baha'i, and Baha'is are encouraged to not think of people as enemies. As she says, they're urged not to harbor resentments and bear grudges towards others. They should strive to see something they love and respect with every soul. So really a lot to learn from Mahvash, a lot. One thing I have to say about her, though, she was a principal. She was an avid educator. She was a principal of a school, and she lost her job once the Islamic Republic came, fired all the Baha'is. And then when they said, no, Baha'i youth cannot go to university because of their religion, even if they got 100 out of 100 in their entrance exams, they were not allowed to go to university as a Baha'i. She became the president of BIHE, which is the Baha'i online university for Baha'i youth who want to go to higher education. And a lot of those courses have been transferred here to America. And a lot of the kids from BIHE are now have continued their educations once they got out and gotten their degrees. So she was very instrumental in making BIHE happen. So she's back in prison, and she's 70 years old. So for 20 years of her life, over 25 years of her life, she's 70 now. So she spent her from age 40 to age 70 pretty much in prison. And this is her beautiful face. This is when she was right before she got arrested, and that's her. Do we have any more slides left? And this is her with all of the Baha'is who got arrested at the same time. And here we have it. At this time, is there any discussion, questions? And we will close with a prayer once Michael tells us we have to close with a prayer. And I thank all of you for your patience. I had so much material that I had to narrow down what I was going to do today. And I thank you for your patience, and thank you for inviting me. Is there anything we'd like to discuss? ask questions. I'll do my best. If I don't know it, I'll look it up. Because I have to go make two.
Shahzad, you did such an excellent job. I can't even tell you in words. And
Did you know
how
about
much
your
we
sister-in-law's
appreciate
name and that Mona and Mona?
No,
Oh, then I said that was a surprise for Christy and
no.
Byron.
That was a surprise,
Yeah, that
Shahzad.
was a surprise.
And so Shahzad,
Deborah had her
I
hand
have
up.
little things,
Deborah, do
like,
you
for
have
example,
something?
Yes, I did have a question when you're ready.
Yes.
So I was just curious. I had read somewhere, and I don't remember the source, and I was wondering if perhaps you had come across this when you were doing your research, Shara, that prior to the conference of Bastat, Badash, thank you, that Baha'u'llah and Tahirih had consulted with one another about her unveiling.
Yeah, I have come across that. Yes, I have come across that. No, I think it was her decision. There's no. We need to check Nabil's narratives, I think, to see if it's in there. Online, I found so much different thing. Online is so interesting. You find, you find something and then you go back and then it contradicts it. So I don't have a copy of the Nabil's narrative. If anybody has one, we can look it up. But I promise to look it up and get the fact for you. I'm so sorry. I have both.
After this,
I have both scenarios. So if you find it, please let's share it with the friends so that they know the truth. I need something that can be verified, not through the internet.
Sure.
And I don't have a Nabil's narrative.
Not Wikipedia.
Yeah, no, Wikipedia it gives you the generic. It's like reading Cliff Notes for Shakespeare. I mean,
yeah.
So we'll find the actual which one. I have both, but I need to have it verified. You're right. Yeah, that needs to be verified.
Just an interesting side note with the video that you showed about Mona, the reenactment of Mona's martyrdom, that the person who played Mona is a friend of mine.
Oh.
And she's a Mahmoudi, and so her in-laws were two of the National Spiritual Assembly members who were martyred.
Oh, that's very significant.
Yeah.
The Baha'is of Iran have been through so much, and right before all of the women's upheaval situation, they were desecrating people's homes with bulldozers. Right before that started happening, and it's like the first thing they get on the Baha'is right away. That's the first thing they get on, because the Baha'is are not going to fight back. They're law-abiding citizens, and they're not going to do that. And so they're the first ones to always get in a lot of trouble. And so there's, we just have to pray for them and talk to our senators, I guess, and see if anybody will speak up for human rights. So
Byron and Christy had their hand up.
Byron and
Good
Christy.
Good advice. These are little questions like, well, one was a little comment. Holy war. I love how in Agdas it talks about Kitabi Agdas, the Holy Baha'u'llah ends Holy War, and I love that you brought that in there. And the other thing is gravesite. When you say they desecrate graves, I always wondered, did they just like crush the gravestones, or do they actually take the I hate to ask this, but
No, I can tell you one thing. I had a friend who was the cousin of Mona. He was a friend of mine, and he actually moved her body. He was able to go and move her body, and it's an undisclosed location on a mountain. And he told me, I did it. He did it.
Wow.
He knows where she's buried. He knows where she's buried. But I think some of the family members did that. They went and took their bodies, but some couldn't. And I think they they completely desecrated it, and they made a road highway over it. So they're under the cars.
Kathleen raised her hand. Kathleen.
Casey?
So Hey, I had a lot of problems with my headphones right at the beginning, so you might have already said this, but I'm curious how big a percentage of Baha'i in Iran?
Oh, we're the largest religious minority in Iran. Largest religious minority in Iran with no rights.
And so it's been like this whole time.
From the beginning. Yes.
Wow.
Anybody would like to add to that, especially any of you who would like to add more statistics to that? Deborah, you're so good at that.
No, I'm good.
It's
out of my
it's
league.
been a long, difficult journey, especially for the women. Because in the Baha'i faith, we believe in the equality of men and women, and that men and women should be like the wings of the bird. Unless there's balance between the wings, the bird doesn't fly. It doesn't mean we do the same jobs.
Right.
But we, women are the first mothers. We're the first ones to teach our children how to read and write and how to love and hug and kiss. And it's like, once you don't have, and it's the men are the ones that are fighting for us. That's what's beautiful. But the system is so corrupt. There's no separation of church and state. There's no, anyway, that's a human rights issue. And that's why we try to bring consciousness to this issue. It has been how many years since Mona was killed and martyred? I think it's been 30 years?
30.
Yeah. Because I remember when my
40
dad
years, 40.
40, yeah. She was a year older than me. So I remember when my dad had a meltdown. I mean, he couldn't believe it. And they just randomly announced his name in the middle of the meeting. And I said, what's wrong with Dad? And my mom said, that's his brother. That's his best friend, his soulmate. They grew up together. Your sister's name is Mona because of her, them. So
is there a large tendency to immigrate for people who can escape that?
Yeah, there's a lot of yes, there is, and the U.S. government has. I came here as a refugee with asylum, and so a lot of people have come here because of United Nations and human rights causes. Now, for instance, the Jewish community, the Zoroastrian community, they have representation in the Senate and in the Parliament of Iran, but Baha'is do not, because we don't do partisan politics anyway. But but Baha'is have no representation or rights. We can't go to university. We can't worship in public. We can't meet in public. It goes on.
They don't recognize our marriages.
They don't recognize our marriages. So if you're a Baha'i and you get you're a prostitute because you're having you're having a relationship outside of marriage. Yeah, that your marriages aren't counted. So and so on, and so and the false accusations all the time. I mean, they do come and take your books and rip them up and burn them, and it's been like this throughout history, hasn't it? I mean, weren't the Christians fed to the lions in the times of Rome? I mean, any faith that comes in with the new teaching, that happens. It's because of fear. Why are we afraid to eradicate racism and prejudice? Because we're afraid? Is it because we're afraid that we can be one and happy together in peace? Why is it that in Texas, all of a sudden we can't talk about diversity, or we're going to be sued in a federal crime? Because, I mean, KC has worked on this fabulous workshop about diversity, and now she's told she can't talk about it anymore, do it anymore. She has created this, she's a diversity trained instructor, and she cannot teach it. She was told she's not allowed to use it in her classes, so she's kind of going around the system. And hey, I was told I'm not going to get into trouble if you use me as diversity. Anyway,
that's good.
We're not going to
get anybody in trouble.
We can't get fired. Anyway, it's been rough. It's they just announced to all of the professors in the state laws that are coming into effect September 1st that we cannot do in our classrooms anymore, because we will get into trouble. Anything else, Michael? Is there anything?
I would like to conclude on those thoughts and just say that, yes, the Baha'i faith seems to take progress forward, and then, you know, we have martyrs, and so it's a steady, it's not a steady progress, you know. It has 2 steps forward and 2 steps back. You get good news and you get bad news, but there have been dissertations on the Baha'i faith and how the martyrs are treated, and it's heroic. There's no examples of it elsewhere. Most martyrs aren't treated as badly, and it's just really, really sad, especially in the birthplace of the faith of Iran. So,
and we are so blessed to be in a country that so far we can still have freedom of thought and expression. We
yes.
have freedoms that we don't have. It. We are so blessed to have these things. And when those things are taken away from us, we have to be on guard about our freedoms, you know, and talk to our officials about what things that are not just, and not protesting, not making it political. It's becoming corrupt. But I think that it's important that as we know ourselves as human beings of what is right and what is just, that we are able to fight for that with our elected officials and educate them. Do you know how many of my colleagues went to just educate the senators about what tenure is? They're doing away, want to do away with tenure. And most of our representatives didn't even know what tenure was. They have no clue what it is. And so they had to sit there and educate them and tell them what it's about. Academic freedom more than anything. Yeah. You can still get fired if you have tenure, but it's more
about your story about Mona and how that was the most important, you know, aspect for her, and that was the driving force for her.
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech is, you know, very, very powerful.
The essay is what got her into trouble, and ultimately her dad was arrested because of it too.
Jessica, would you be free to unmute yourself and get us onto the say the prayer, if I can bring it up?
Glory to thee, O my God, one of thy handmaidens, who hath believed in thee and in thy signs, hath entered beneath the shadow of the tree of thy oneness. Give her to quaff, O my God, by thy name, the manifest and the hidden of thy choice sealed wine, that it may take her away from her own self and make her to be entirely devoted to thy remembrance and wholly detached from anyone beside thee. Now that thou hast revealed unto her the knowledge of thee, O my Lord, deny her not by thy bounty, thy grace, and now that thou hast called her unto thyself, drive her not away from thee through thy favor. Supply her then with that which excelleth all that can be found on thine earth. Thou art verily the most bountiful, whose grace is immense. Wert thou to bestow on one of thy creatures what would equal the kingdoms of earth and heaven, it would still not diminish by even as much as an atom the immensity of thy dominion. Far greater art thou than the great one men are wont to call thee. For such a little is but one thy names. Such a title is but one of thy names, all of which were created by a mere indication of thy will.
One more special thank you, Sharzad. I really love how you took the heroines of the early days, because that's who Mona and the present day women of Iran are looking to for inspiration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank
I love you. Please, when you come to Texas, please come see me next time. Love you all.
Yes.